Okay, welcome to all after the break. So, hope I'm audible as well as visible to you all. Right. So, please confirm that I'm audible as well as visible. Done. So, we made an effort in understanding something called as global warming and climate change, the difference between global warming and climate change. Right. And then greenhouse effect, counter radiation, and also that after 1960s after 1960s we find there has been tremendous increase in the usage of fossil fuels in the usage of fossil fuels and these fossil fuels are responsible for increasing the large amount of greenhouse gas in the earth's atmosphere, and this greenhouse gas is responsible for what we refer them as the global warming, increasing of the greenhouse gas. We refer that as global warming, where the average temperature of Earth is increasing. So, hence, we say the major culprits are fossil fuels, and this is referred as anthropogenic. Anthropogenic. It means that man-made factor. It is man-made issue. Anthropogenic, man-made part. Right. Now, if you take a data, according to the Global Carbon Project, country wise, when we say their emission, if you take United States, it has emitted 14 point, sorry, when you take per capita emissions, per capita means per person, the carbon dioxide which is emitted, every individual. In the United States, it is 14.9 tons of carbon dioxide. If you take Russia, it is 8.5, sorry, 11.4. If you take Japan, it is 8.5. And the global average is very, very less. Global average of per capita release of the carbon dioxide or greenhouse gas, it is 4.7 tons. Now, can anybody tell what is India's per capita greenhouse gas emission? What is India's per capita emission? Is it more than global average or it is less than global average? India's per capita emission of the carbon dioxide, per capita emission, is it more or is it less? It is very less than the global average. It is very less than the global average. Very lesser than global average. But why the impact of the India's is seen as more concern? The reason is, even though the per capita emission is less, volume wise it is more. The population of India is very high. The population is more. So hence the contribution of India is comparatively seen as major because of the population which is more, even though the per capita is less. Even though the per capita is less, very less, but still volume wise it is more compared to the population of US. India's population is more compared to population of Japan. India's population is more. But in spite of low per capita, volume wise it is more. Volume wise it is more. Apart from that, if you take the historic emission, that is from 1850 to 2022, we refer that as historic emitters. The cumulative means starting from 1850 till 2020, starting from 1850 till 2022, the total amount of gas emitted, the total, we refer that as cumulative, which is by US is 115 gigatons. From US it is 115 gigatons. And if you take the China, which is 70, if you take China, which is 70 gigatons, gigatons. And if we take India, if we take India, the India's emission is 15 gigatons since 1850. 15 gigatons since 1850. So it means that it is just 3% of the world's total. So the total amount of the greenhouse gas emission by India from 1850 to 2022, it is 3% of the global emission. 3% of global emission. So please remember this. Now, who is historical emitters? It is US and the developed countries. US and the developed countries, which are responsible for adding large amount of the carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases. Now, what could be the solution for this? It is something like you are having a sponge and water. If the sponge is increased, then it will absorb more amount of water. In the same way, if you replace the sponge with greenhouse gases and water with the temperature, if the greenhouse gases increases, then it will absorb large amount of the temperature, which will lead to global warming. And the only way where we can reduce the impact of global warming or make strong perspective in reducing the average temperature is to reduce the carbon dioxide emission, reduce the carbon dioxide emission, or to remove the carbon dioxide emission, remove the carbon dioxide which is seen in the atmosphere. Now this can be done by planting more trees, photosynthesis which can absorb the carbon dioxide, photosynthesis which can absorb the carbon dioxide, right? Or removing it by using a technology. So this carbon dioxide can be removed from the earth's atmosphere. One is naturally, that is by planting the trees, green plants. Second one is you can remove the atmospheric carbon dioxide by using a technology, by using a technology. We don't have at present any technologies, so we have to do that. And second thing is, to control the global warming, we have to encourage the fossil fuel or we have to discourage the fossil fuel. So when we talk about curbing of carbon dioxide, we have to discourage the fossil fuel or we have to encourage the fossil fuel. When we talk about the aspects of global warming, right, fossil fuels, they have to be discouraged. The fossil fuels has to be discouraged. And instead of that, we should encourage clean energy. We should encourage clean energy. Encourage clean energy. Right. So hence, if you are reading the policies, they always say we should phase down, phase out fossil fuels. Phase down means reducing, phase out means completely removing. So phase down, phasing out of fossil fuels, fossil subsidies. Now the moment when you reduce the subsidies, when you remove the subsidies, then the cost of the product will become very high. And when the cost is more, then its usage decreases, its purchase decreases. Any cost which becomes costly, then we will think two times to utilize that in our daily activities. So when the subsidies are reduced, when the subsidies are phased out, then the cost of that coal will increase, and that will make to think twice to use that. We will use it only when it is mandatory, or else we will not use. So hence we talk about subsidies phasing out, subsidies phasing down, clean energies, removing of carbon dioxide, the natural process, technology process, etc. So all these are the terms which we will be getting in the context of global warming and climate change. Is that clear? Now, the term which is referred as global warming potential. Now, always remember, if we take all greenhouse gases, if we take all greenhouse gases, it can be carbon dioxide, methane, water vapor, etc. So all the greenhouse gases, they do not have uniform characteristics. They do not have uniform characteristics. All greenhouse gases, they differ. They differ in two properties. They differ in two properties. Right. So it is something like the heat absorbing capacity. If you take the cotton and silk, even though they are same, but their absorbing capacities are not same. If you take many cottons, in that cotton cloths, all the cotton cloths will not absorb uniformly. Some cotton will absorb more, some cotton will be lesser than that comparatively. So here also all greenhouse gas differs in two properties. The first one is heat absorbing capacity. Heat absorbing capacity. Absorbing capacity. Right. And we refer that as radiative efficiency. We refer this as radiative efficiency. Radiative efficiency. Right. So some greenhouse gases will absorb more heat, some will absorb comparatively lesser than that. Right. So heat absorbing capacity is not uniform. Second one is the life of these greenhouse gases. Life of greenhouse gas is also not uniform, is not same. Not same. Now, if we take the water vapor, so this water vapor can be for a week or 10 days. It can't stay longer than that. If you take methane, if you take methane, so this methane can survive in the Earth's atmosphere for 12 to 14 years. 14 years, methane. But if you take the carbon dioxide, this carbon dioxide is a unique type of a gas which stays in the atmosphere for 300 years up to 1000 years. Up to 1000 years. And hence carbon dioxide is referred as centurion gas. It stays for centuries in the Earth's atmosphere. It is referred as centurion gas. It stays for a longer period of a time, hundreds of years, right? So hence we find that the life of these greenhouse gases is not same, and their heating capacities are also not same. So hence it is difficult to calculate the data of every individual greenhouse gas. Every individual greenhouse gas, it is very difficult. So hence what we do is we compare all the greenhouse gas with that of carbon dioxide, because carbon dioxide has a life of more than 100 years. It is centurion gas. So hence we compare all greenhouse gas impact, all greenhouse gas capacities, their absorbing capacities, their heating capacities with that of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide. We compare all other greenhouse gases capacities with that of carbon dioxide. And this creates a concept called as global warming potential. This is referred as the global warming potential. Global warming potential. That is the global warming potential of all the greenhouse gases compared to that of carbon dioxide. Compared to that of carbon dioxide. Is it clear? Compared to that of carbon dioxide. All other greenhouse gas compared to carbon dioxide. So this concept is referred as global warming potential. That is how much of energy emission of 1 ton of greenhouse gas will absorb in a given period with reference to carbon dioxide. Because all greenhouse gas will have different absorption capacities and their life is also different. So hence we compare all the greenhouse gases with that of carbon dioxide. And if you take the criteria here, if we put the carbon dioxide as one unit, if you take methane, even though methane stays there in the atmosphere for 12 years, so it is having 23 times more heating capacity than that of carbon dioxide. So 23 means 23 times more than the heating effect of methane is 23 times more than carbon dioxide. More than carbon dioxide. So whatever life it stays, the 14 years, 10 years. So in that 10 years or 14 years, it heats the Earth's atmosphere 23 times more than what the carbon dioxide can does. Now, in the same way, if you take this HFC, hydrofluorocarbon 134A, it can heat 1300 times more than that of the carbon dioxide. If we take HFC 23, it is having the potential capacity of heating 12,000 times more than that of the carbon dioxide. And this comparison, when we compare the heating effect of the greenhouse gases with that of carbon dioxide, we refer that as the global warming potential. And generally, this is referred, or this is reflected as, when we don't have carbon dioxide, it is equivalent to carbon dioxide. Equivalent to carbon dioxide. So we refer that as a term, carbon dioxide equivalent. We refer this as carbon dioxide equivalent. Equivalent. So CO2e, carbon dioxide equivalent. It is the measure where we compare the emission from various greenhouse gases with global warming potential of the carbon dioxide. So we use the term CO2, or we use the term CO2e. Now the difference between CO2 and CO2e, the difference between CO2 and CO2 is, if you say CO2, then we are talking only about carbon dioxide. And if you take CO2e, so we are taking greenhouse gases into consideration. We are taking greenhouse gases into consideration, and all greenhouse gases are compared with carbon dioxide. So it is equivalent. It is equivalent. So henceforth, we will always have the term carbon dioxide or carbon dioxide equivalent, CO2e. HFC 134A is under HFC. See here, their capacities are different, their compositions are different, and hence their absorbing capacities are also very, very different from each other. So they will never ask you why it is there. But remember that among them, HFC 23 is most greenhouse gas, most potential greenhouse gas. They will never ask you why they behave like that. Don't go in-depth analysis of that. Is it clear? Just remember that they are the greenhouse gases which are having high potential impact. So that's why we are making the Kigali amendment to make sure that these HFCs are curbed down. These HFCs are curbed down. Is it clear? CO2 plus greenhouse gas, CO2. See, when we say, yes, CO2 plus other greenhouse gases, perfect. CO2 plus other greenhouse gas when you combine, any greenhouse gas when you combine in that. So it is referred as CO2 equivalent. So sometimes you don't have carbon dioxide, then how you will represent that? So when you don't have carbon dioxide, instead of that you are having water vapor, methane, nitrous oxides are there. So here you don't have carbon dioxide. Then what you will do is you will compare all these capacities with that of carbon dioxide. Then whatever the carbon dioxide have an impact, you will mention that in the form of CO2e of all these three gases. Is it clear? So we refer that as CO2 and CO2e. E means equivalent, equivalent of the impact of other greenhouse gases compared to that of carbon dioxide. Right. Now, next is the terms called as the carbon footprint, carbon sink, carbon sequestration, which we will be using often and often. What is carbon footprint? It is the amount of carbon dioxide, or at best we can say greenhouse gases. The simple definition is carbon dioxide. Now we can use the term greenhouse gas. It is the amount of the greenhouse gas which is emitted by an individual, by a company, by a program, or a function. So that amount of carbon dioxide which is emitted, we refer that as carbon footprint. So whatever classes I'm taking from 12 to 8, the amount of carbon dioxide which is emitted during the class, so that is called as the carbon footprint of the weekend class from 12 to 8 p.m. If you are celebrating birthday party, so that birthday party you will be emitting the carbon dioxide and other gases. That emission which is done during the birthday party, we refer that as carbon footprint of that birthday party. Right. So it is the quantity of greenhouse gases which are emitted during the human cycle, industry, company, which is expressed in carbon dioxide equivalent, which is expressed in carbon dioxide equivalent. We refer that as carbon footprint. Every program, every function, every office will have their carbon footprints. Now, anything which absorbs more carbon dioxide than what it can emit back, we refer that as carbon sink. We refer that as carbon sink. So when we say carbon sinks, the best carbon sinks are ocean, then forest, right? Which absorbs more amount of carbon dioxide than what it can be emitted back. So we refer that as carbon sink. See, when we talk about water vapor, so water vapor is also a greenhouse gas, but the life of water vapor is very less. It stays for hardly 8 days or 10 days. So 65% of the water vapor is there, but its life is very, very small. Its life is very small. The water vapor stays for hardly 8 or 10 days. It stays for 8 and 10 days, not beyond that. So within that its impact compared to the large accumulation of other gases is less here. So hence, water vapor are the water vapor are released always during the evaporation and all. Their concentration may be abundant, but the life of them is very less compared to carbon dioxide and all. But during the evaporation, during those activities, abundant amount of water vapor is emitted. But in spite of that, their harmful impacts are not seen as what you see in the carbon dioxide. The reason is the life is very, very less compared to other greenhouse gases, right? Then carbon sequestration. Now here you should remember, I told that we have to remove the carbon dioxide from the earth's atmosphere. So removal of the carbon dioxide from the earth's atmosphere, removing of the carbon dioxide from the earth's atmosphere is referred as sequestration. Removing and storing. Sequester means storing. Removing of carbon dioxide and storing, we refer that as carbon sequestration. Now this carbon dioxide sequestration can be done in two ways. One is natural way, that is where we make more amount of plants, that is plants, afforestation, etc., where it is stored by the process called as photosynthesis, like the carbon which is stored in the green plants or the carbon which is stored in the aquatic plants, we refer that as blue carbon. Now the second one is, then this carbon dioxide which is stored is natural process, and we refer that as biological carbon sequestration, right? Apart from that, we also have the technology which can absorb the carbon dioxide. So we'll take this later when we talk about carbon neutrality, etc. So there it is important. We use a technology to absorb the carbon dioxide. We absorb the carbon dioxide by using a technology, and then we will store that carbon dioxide. We will store the carbon dioxide at deep in the earth's interior, maybe in the oceans, or maybe abandoned coal seams, abandoned oil fields. We capture them and we store them in the rocks, abandoned coal seams, etc. And this type of the carbon sequestration is referred as geological carbon sequestration, where the process of storing the carbon dioxide underground in geological formations like the rock stratas, etc., lock strata, etc. And this you should remember. So two ways the carbon sequestration can be done. One is the natural process, and then the geological one. Natural process every countries are doing, India and all. And this technological process, we need a technology. So we don't have any technology which can capture the atmospheric carbon dioxide. So hence it will take time for the countries to develop the technology. So two ways the atmospheric carbon dioxide can be done. So please fix this in the mind. One is called as natural or biological sequestration, and this is called as artificial, or we say method or technology is used in capturing and storing them into the great bath. Is it clear? Okay. Then we move on to the impact of climate change in all the sectors. Now we'll take up individually. Floods and droughts. Now the moment when you take floods and droughts, so floods and droughts, if you see their characteristics, the intensity, frequency, and the magnitude of floods and droughts have increased. We say their intensity, frequency, and magnitude magnitude have increase. So what does it mean? It means that intensity means their severity. Intensity means their severity. Frequency means they are occurring often and often. They are occurring often and often. Often and often. Magnitude means area of operation. Area of operation. So initially, small area was affected. Now the area has increased. Now the area has increased. So when you are reading your current affairs, so a small area was affected. Say 5 districts of the states were affected. Now we find 15 districts are affected. And the intensity is also increased. Initially, only the crops were affected. Now we find even animals are also affected by the severity of the drought here or the floods here. And the frequency means they are often and often appearing, often and often appearing. So hence, due to the impact of global warming and climate change, we say that the floods and droughts, they have increased in the intensities, frequencies and magnitude. When we store carbon dioxide in the sea, it can react with the sea. It is storing at deep ocean waters. That is in the rock strata. I told in the rock strata, it is not storing in the open ocean. There is a process which is involved. So when I take that sequestration part, I'll explain that. It is not in the surface of the ocean or in the beneath part. Within the ocean, deep rock stratas are there, geological structures. So there they will store and keep them. There they will store and keep them. Is it clear? So here it has increased in intensity, frequency, and magnitude. So all the three have been increased due to flood and the droughts. So many districts are affected, many areas are affected. So we find floods, droughts are increased in intensity, frequency, and magnitude. They are becoming very dangerous now. Now, warming of ocean water. Warming of ocean water. So what is the impact of warming of ocean water? Now understand this. Warming of ocean water means its temperature increases. So when the temperature increases, then the water will expand. When the temperature increases, water will expand. And when the water expands, sea level will increase. Sea level or water level will increase. Water level will rise. And this will lead to submergence of the coastal areas. It will reach to submergence. I'm talking only one aspect, that water expands and it will make the submergence of coastal area. That is one. Then second aspect is whenever when the temperature increases, when the temperature increases, so the water oxygen holding capacity decreases. Water's oxygen holding capacity decreases. Holding capacity decreases. It can't hold more oxygen when it is heated. So that water will have shortage of oxygen. Shortage of oxygen. And this condition, when there is a shortage of oxygen, we refer that as hypoxia. Hypoxia. When there is a shortage of oxygen. When there is, because the temperature is not suitable for H2O to hold the water. So the moment when you warm the water, the oxygen holding capacity drastically decreases in the water. Then if the concentration of oxygen decreases drastically low, if it decreases drastically low, oxygen is there, very severe shortage of oxygen is there, then we refer this condition as anoxia. So when there is a condition called as anoxia in the oceans, or in the rivers, etc., severe shortage of oxygen, so the organisms which are there, so they will need oxygen, and the severe shortage of oxygen will make them to have suffocation. So this anoxia condition makes these organisms to undergo suffocation. So they will not have sufficient oxygen to survive. Suffocation. And also and also these organisms, as there is tremendous decrease in the oxygen, they can't move, they lose their energy, they can't make much movement. So they can't move, they don't have energy, and they can't move also, they can't move from that area. And this leads to death of many organisms. And we refer that as dead zone. We refer this as dead zone. We refer that as dead zone. So please remember here, dead zones can be created by two factors. One is due to climate change, and another factor is pollution. So regarding pollution, I'll discuss when I take pollution. Right. So we'll discuss that. So here we talk about anoxia and hypoxia. Hypoxia means shortage of oxygen. Anoxia means severe shortage of oxygen. It is something like this. You are having 1,000 rupees, suddenly you reached with 100, that is called as hypoxia. And then you are having only 2 rupees left out with you. We refer that as severe shortage, that is anoxia. Severe shortage of oxygen, we refer that as anoxia. And this anoxia will lead to the death of many organisms here. Is it clear? So remember these perspective. And we refer that as dead zones. We refer that as dead zones. So warming of oceans. These two. Now next is cyclones. So when we talk about the cyclones, so we always have two types of cyclones. One is the tropical cyclone, and then we are having the cyclones which are there in the temperate areas. We refer them as temperate cyclones or extratropical cyclones, or we refer them as mid latitude cyclones. So two types of cyclones are there: the tropical cyclones and the temperate cyclones, which are found in the mid latitude. So these are referred as the temperate cyclones which are found here. Now what is the impact of climate change on the tropical cyclones? So tropical cyclones are referred as thermal in origin because they are associated with the temperature. So average temperature, if it is 27 degrees centigrade, then the tropical cyclone can be formed. The tropical cyclone can be formed when the temperature is 27. Now what happens when the temperature increases? What happens when the temperature increases? That is, when the sea surface temperature increases. Sea surface means the ocean temperature. When it increases to 27 to say 29 degrees centigrade, what will happen? Then evaporation will be more moisture will be added, and the tropical cyclone will become severe. So the impact of increasing temperature is the tropical cyclones will increase in numbers. So their numbers will increase, their formation or the numbers will increases. That is one. Second, as due to more temperature, more evaporation, more latent heat, more latent heat. So hence the tropical cyclones will not only increase in the number, they will become severe. They will become severe. So they are not only increasing the number, they are becoming severe. Apart from that, more number of tropical cyclones are making very strong impact when they make landfalls. Very strong impact when they make landfalls. So what is landfall of a tropical cyclone? Any cyclone, when it moves from the ocean, when it reaches to the coastal areas, when it enters to the land area, we refer them as landfalls. So this will make severe impact when they make landfall. It will create huge precipitation. It will create huge precipitation. It will create huge amount of floods. It will create high velocity winds. High velocity winds will be there. High velocity winds. So they have increased in the number. They are also becoming severe, and severe impact is there when they make landfall, because they have large amount of latent energy which is stored with them. Large amount of latent energy which is stored in them. Latent energy which is stored in them. Right, now understand here. Right, so these tropical cyclones, they are becoming severe. So what do you mean by severe? It means that they are intensifying. The normal cyclones are intensifying. Intensifying means they are becoming stronger. They are becoming stronger. Stronger, it means that they are intensifying. They are intensifying. So the tropical cyclones have not only increased, they are increasing in their strength. We refer them as intensifying. So it means their strength is increasing. Increasing. SST means sea surface temperature. The above, sea surface temperature. Sea surface temperature. Landfall. Landfall means when the cyclone enters from ocean. So always remember, tropical cyclones will develop only on water bodies, and from water bodies they enter into land area. And this process where they enter into land area, we refer that as landfall of tropical cyclone. Landfall of tropical cyclone. So whenever landfall is done, it will bring heavy rainfall. If it is severe, then heavy rainfall, floods, floods in the coastal areas, high velocity winds in the coastal areas, in the coastal areas. Huge impacts will be there. So it means that they become very dangerous, very dangerous when they make landfall. So which creates disasters, which creates disasters. Now we'll move on to intensifying factor. So they are becoming very strong, and that is where they are becoming dangerous. They are becoming very dangerous. Intensifying means gaining the strength, gaining the latent energy. So generally any tropical cyclone, it will take 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, or a week to intensify. It will absorb the latent energy, and it will take 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, and it will gain the strength, right? But now as the sea surface temperatures are increasing very fast, SST, sea surface temperatures are increasing very fast, and because of that they are gaining strength very fast. Gaining strength very fast, it means that they are intensifying very fast. They are intensifying very fast. Now when we say intensifying very fast, it means that the wind velocity in which they are rotating is increasing very fast in a shorter period of a time. So it means that their rotating wind velocity, if the wind velocity of the tropical cyclone, which is dangerously rotating around the low pressure center, if the wind velocity increases to more than 55 kilometers per hour, more than 55 kilometers per hour in a day, then such conditions we refer that as rapid intensification of tropical cyclone. We refer this as rapid intensification of tropical cyclone. Intensification of tropical cyclone, right? So hence we say, in the context of climate change, the tropical cyclones are not only increased in the number, they are becoming severe. And not only they are severe, they are rapidly intensifying. They are rapidly intensifying. Intensifying, which has created major threat to the coastal communities, which has created major problem to the coastal communities. So many times we find the tropical cyclones is gaining its energy in very less period of a time, that is less than 24 hours, and we refer that as rapid intensification. Is it clear? So these are the terms associated with the cyclones which have increased in the numbers. After the landfall, they bring huge socioeconomic losses. And these cyclones are gaining their energies in a very short period of a time, within a day. And that too, where they are increasing their velocities more than 55 kilometers per hour. And such types of velocities, cyclones, we refer them as rapid intensification. See this, rapid intensification, which makes them to increase their wind velocities to more than 55 kilometers per hour. We refer that as rapid intensification. And this rapid intensification is associated with tropical cyclone. Tropical cyclones. Right. Now, we have something called as the temperate cyclones. I told you here, temperate cyclones. Temperate cyclones. So, what are the impact of the climate change on the temperate cyclones? So, how the temperate cyclones are affecting? So generally, when we talk about the temperate cyclones are formed by two air masses. Just reconnect your geography. Two air masses, that is cold air mass, warm air mass. So when the cold air mass and warm air mass, when they meet, then they will create a front. They will create a front. We refer that as frontogenesis. Frontogenesis. And this front, if it is occluded, then this will create something called as temperate cyclone. Temperate cyclone, occluded, and it creates temperate cyclones. And generally, when we talk about temperate cyclones, we say temperate cyclones like western disturbances in India. Western disturbance is a temperate cyclone. So temperate cyclones are human friendly. Human friendly. That means they do not have much impact on the socio-economic activities losses aspect. So they are very human friendly. Wind velocities will be less and small amount of rainfall will be there. We refer them as temperate or extratropical or mid-latitude cyclones, right? But now understand the impact of climate change and global warming is such that if you take this area, now this is Arctic region, and here we are having a tropical area. Now due to the role of polar vortex and jet stream which has become weaker, the cold winds are moving towards mid latitude. So strong cold winds are moving towards mid latitude. So strong cold winds, air masses are moving towards the mid latitude areas. And from the mid latitude regions, we find that warm air masses are moving towards them. Like the Gulf Stream, which is a warm ocean current. So where we find moisture laden winds which are developed from the Gulf Stream or that region, warm, which are heavily flooded with the moisture. So moisture laden winds from the Gulf Stream and the cold winds from the Arctic, when they meet here, more specifically, the meeting places, what we say, in the eastern part of US or in the western part of Europe, in the western part of Europe, in the Europe. So very ideal place where they can meet is this area, eastern part, the Gulf Stream and the cold winds from Arctic. And because of the extreme cold winds and because of the extreme warm winds, so the pressure in that area drops to less than 24 millibars in 24 hours. The pressure drastically decreases. Pressure drops drastically to less than 24 millibars in 24 hours. In 24 hours. And this sudden drop of the pressure creates steep pressure gradient. And this steep pressure gradient make the cyclone more dangerous one. It is just like an explosion, strong occlusion. And this is where the cyclone, which is the temperate cyclone, which is normal one, it becomes more dangerous one. And such types of cyclones which become more dangerous, we refer them as bombogenesis or bomb cyclone. We refer that as bomb cyclone or bombogenesis. And this is what has been experienced by US last week, last month, where they experienced such type of conditions. Bombogenesis, bomb cyclones, which were experienced in the east coast of America. And also the strong storms were there. The strong storms from the polar region, Arctic, moved towards the eastern part of the US and the western part of Europe, which created extremely severe snowfall. And these snowfalls were accompanied by the temperate cyclones, which were bomb cyclones, which created heavy downpour, which made the life miserable in the US and the western part of Europe. And we refer that as the bomb cyclone or bombogenesis. In a very simple term, bombogenesis or bomb cyclones are referred to mid latitude or extratropical cyclone or temperate cyclone or extratropical cyclone. They are not tropical cyclone, they are temperate cyclones, where they are formed by interaction of two air masses, cold air mass and warm air mass. So mid latitude, when it rapidly intensifies and drops the pressure 25 millibars in less than 24 hours, and we refer this phenomenon as bomb cyclone or bombogenesis, which affects the east coast of US and Western Europe, where they find extreme cold conditions, which can create large amount of snow and cold winds. Generally, these cold winds we refer them as blizzards, which brings the cold winds towards the mid latitude. And sometimes they are accompanied by heavy precipitation and high velocity winds, heavy rain and high velocity winds. Why? Because of bomb cyclone. Such phenomena are seen in the context of temperate cyclones. So hence, tropical cyclones have already become dangerous. Now the temperate cyclones are also becoming dangerous in the mid latitude region, more specifically in the eastern US and the western European part. So we refer this as the bombogenesis or bomb cyclone, and this has been experienced in the year 2024 and 2023 also. They have experienced this extreme cold winds hit the eastern part of US and the western part of Europe. Is that clear? So impact of the climate change on cyclones, tropical cyclone and temperate cyclones. The next, acidification of ocean. So if you see the average salinity of ocean water, it is 8.2. So pH value of ocean water average is 8.2. Average. Now if you take the salinity of Atlantic Ocean is very high. Reasons are different, but the average salinity is 8.2. Now carbon dioxide, when it enters into the ocean, so this carbon dioxide reacts with the hydrogen part of water. It reacts with the hydrogen part of water and convert that into mild carbonic acid. And this we refer that as acidification of ocean. This is called as acidification of ocean. and this will have a significant impact on many species. Example, corals, where it will affect their skeletons, it will affect their larvae. So it affects all those because they are made up of calcium carbonate. They are made up of calcium carbonate, right? So here, when there is a concentration of carbon dioxide which increases there, so the pH value of ocean water starts decreasing. Rather, from 8.2, it can reach to 8.1, 8, etc. It starts decreasing. It means it will show the decreasing trend. Show the decreasing trend. It does not mean that it will reach below 7. It does not mean that it will reach below 7, but it shows the decreasing trend. Decreasing trend. And this is called as the ocean acidification. If you see the present scenarios, the average salinity of ocean water is 8.2. Average salinity is 8.2. And if you compare that by 2050, it can be somewhere below 8 if the same process is continued. It can be that. And if it is persisting in the same way, by the end of this century it will be somewhere below 7.8. So it does not mean that it will be falling below the 7. So it will be more than 7, but it will show decreasing trend. It will show decreasing trend, and we refer that as, right. So this is what we refer them as, the acidification of the ocean, right. Then next is increased incidences of forest fires. So because of the climate change, many forest areas where they're experiencing drought and low rainfall, low rainfall. So droughts and low rainfall. So this makes the vegetation dry. This makes the vegetation dry. And dry vegetation can catch forest fire very easily. It can catch forest fire very easily. Apart from that, we find the incidences of heat waves have been increased. Incidences of heat waves have been increased. And we also find large amount of complex phenomena like heat domes have increased. Heat domes have been increased in many countries. And these in turn can create the condition for catching up of the fires. Catching up of the fires. Is it clear? So this is what we refer that as the impact of the climate change on the forest fires. Is it clear? Forest fires. Then heat waves and cold waves. Now, when we talk about heat waves and cold waves, so remember that it talks about the same intensity, frequency, and magnitude of heat waves and cold waves have been increased. Intensity, frequency, and magnitude of both heat waves and cold waves have been increased. So initially we used to get the heat waves for 5 days. Now they have increased to 15 days. Cold waves we used to get for 10 days. Now they have increased to 15 or 20 days. So hence we find their days have been increased. Days have been increased. And they are becoming very severe. So the temperature is increasing very high and it is dropping also very high. So they are becoming very severe. They are becoming very severe. Now, if you take an example of Delhi. So Delhi during the summer season, it will experience heat waves during the summer season. And the same Delhi during the winter season, it is experiencing cold waves. It is experiencing cold waves. And in both the cases, we find their frequencies have increased, severity has been increased. So initially some 10 years back or 20 years back or 50 years back, very small amount of population was affected. Now we find it is affecting larger population. It's becoming severe areas. And occasionally we used to have, but now every year we are finding the conditions which are becoming worst day by day. Then rise in the sea level. Rise in the sea level. Now, rise in the sea level is because of two reasons are there. The first one is the melting of the glacier because of the temperature, melting of the glacier. Second one is expanding water, expansion of water. And all these both are responsible for sea level rise. Now, what will happen when the sea level increases? So, it will lead to submergence of coastal areas, right? And when the submergence of coastal areas are there, many issues will be there, like saline water entering into agriculture, biodiversity is affected, marine areas, rich biodiversity, they will be affected. Saline water in the agriculture field decreases fertility, mangroves will be affected. Submergence will create huge losses to the industries which are located in that areas. Economic losses will be there. So all type of losses will be there. All type of losses will be there. Apart from that, the coastal area will have one more issue associated with the rise in water level, along with submergence, erosion of the coastal area. Erosion of the coastal area. Plus, huge socio-economic losses will be there. Huge socio-economic losses will be there. Losses will be there, right? So this is something basics which we have to understand when we talk about rise in the sea level. Then this is most affected to India because India has a long coastline of 7,516 kilometers. So rise in the sea level will be having a huge impact on India. Then other issues means which is associated with something called as the agricultural crops, etc. Now, disease in the agricultural crops. So when we talk about agricultural crops, agricultural crops. Now, because of the increasing of the temperature globally, globally, every year, every year, every year, we lose $220 billion. Every year, globally, $220 billion are lost because of the disease which are affecting the crops, like leaf blight, roast disease, etc. So every year, $220 billion are lost because of the disease which are affecting to the agricultural crops. Now, second aspect of this increasing temperature is when the temperature is increasing, when the temperature is increasing. So the plants will have their own methods of fighting that. So the defense mechanism of the plants to resist decreases. So the defense mechanism of the plants to resist the disease decreases because of increasing of the temperature, and hence the plant will become more prone to the disease. And apart from that, this increasing temperature increases the incidence of disease. It will increase the incidence of disease. It will increase the incidence of disease, right? Yes, it will affect irrigation also. It will affect irrigation also. Now we are talking about one wise, disease wise. So it will affect the agricultural crops. It will affect the irrigation. It means that the availability of water will be less when the rainfall is less. So it will affect the irrigation perspectives also, right? It will affect that also. So here we are talking about the disease and its impact. Then second major thing associated is migration. Migration, right? Now here you should be very careful. It is migration of the people. So many people are leaving their countries and moving to some other countries. So we find it is international migration is seen. And this international migrations, they are moving from one country to another country, right? They are moving one country to another country. So we call them as refugees. We call them as refugees. But these are the people who are not moving due to any type of conflicts. They are not moving because of any type of war. They are moving because of the impact of climate change. And hence, sometimes they are referred as climate refugees. Climate refugees. Refugees. So we also find the migration of the species, the migration of species. Because if you see the conditions, the tropical area has increased in the temperature. The tropical area where the temperature has increased. And because of the increasing temperature in the tropical area, the marine species are migrating to the temperate areas. So marine species are migrating towards the temperate areas. So hence we find the migration of the species are also there. That is, they are migrating from tropical to the temperate areas. The birds are also shifting to the cooler areas because of the average temperature which is increasing in that areas, right? So we find climate refugees, we find migrations are there. Now there is no exact definition which can define the climate refugees, but still we refer them as climate refugees. And apart from that, we also find the people moves from one area to another area within the country. Within the country we refer that as internal displacement. So within the country we refer them as internal displacement. Internal displacement. Like due to impact of heavy floods in Assam, they will move from Assam to Bihar. We refer that as internal displacement. Heavy cloud bursting in Uttarakhand and Sikkim, they are moved from Sikkim and Uttarakhand to the states of Punjab. We refer that as internal displacement. They are not called as international migration. So we can find both types are there. International migration is there, and then internal displacement is also seen, right? So country to country we refer that as international migration. Within the country we refer that as internal displacement, right? Next, it also associated with large amount of the worms or the pest which attacks that worm or the pest which attacks that, like the fall armyworm. Fall armyworm. And this fall armyworm, it can damage 80 different type of crops. And due to the temperature, due to increase in the temperature, this fall armyworm can spread very fast. It can spread very fast. Very fast. Then we also have an incidences of the large amount of bulk of insects. We refer them as locust. 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 And these locusts are most destructive migratory pests. They are most destructive migratory pests. So wherever when they reach, so that areas they will always eat up everything which is present there. And India experienced them in the year 2020, where entire food grains was eaten up by the locust in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and all those countries. And they generally change their path. They change their path due to climate change. Due to climate change, which can make the huge destruction in the areas where they reach. So refugees are in the international, they are not in the national. In the international part, we refer them as refugees. Any person when he crosses his boundary, or any person when it reaches international part, when it crosses his boundary and reaches to another country, we refer them as refugee. International migration, we have refugees, right? Then ice calving. Ice calving means breaking the chunk of ice. Ice melting is different, calving is different. It is breaking the chunk of the ice. So if this is an ice, so when this portion breaks off, we refer that as ice calving. This is called as ice calving when it breaks. when it breaks. We refer that as ice calving. Ice carving. Now, what is the reason for ice carving? So, because of increasing of the carbon dioxide, the upper portion also the temperature has increased, and large amount of carbon dioxide also enters into ocean. So, CO2 also enters into ocean. So, warming effect is seen from both the sides, from both the sides, and because of that, a portion of ice get detaches from that. It get detaches from that, and we refer that as ice calving. Calving. And these broken ices, we refer them as icebergs. We refer them as icebergs. So many times we find ice calving is seen in many areas like Arctic and Antarctic icebergs. Now, whenever when the icebergs are there, when ice calving is there, so during the ice calving, the thick ice is lost. The thick and old ice is lost. Old ice is lost. And these icebergs, they will melt faster. They will melt faster. Why? Because their surface area increases. Because their surface area increases. And hence, this ice calving has become a major threat for the polar region. So it has become a major threat. Major threat. So this will accelerate the melting of glacier due to increasing in the surface areas. It will accelerate the melting of the glacier in the polar region. So this is something which we refer them as the impact of the global warming and climate change in all the aspects. All the aspects. That is starting from starting from the floods and droughts, warming of ocean water, cyclones, acidification of ocean, heat waves, rise in sea level, other issues, including the ice calving. So these are the terms. Sometimes they may ask individually, and sometimes they may ask combinedly. Sometimes they may ask combinedly. Is it clear? Now, we moved on to understand the chronology. Chronology. So at this stage, every world every country of the world, they knew that there is something where the global warming and climate change is happening. It was known to them. It was known to them. Now we'll try to understand the chronology, which all started from 1960s and up to today. Chronology from 1960 up to today, and the major events of that. The major events of that. Right now, in the 1960s, when we talk about the 1960s, in the 1960s, the environmentalist means who make their voices in the context of the climate change and all these. So we find there was large amount of environmentalists. They raise their voices. They raise their voices with reference to the changing climate. With reference to changing climate. They did not have complete idea, but they felt that there is something which is making some issue, where the floods have increased, the cyclones have increased in 1960s. They find that there is something which is seen here, which is making some impact on the global part. And this 1960s episode of environmentalists who raised their voices in response to this, in response to this, the countries of the world, by catching the activities of environmentalists, in response to that, countries in their world, all the countries in the world, so they began to take actions to protect environment within the boundary, in response to the environmental voices which were raised by the different association, different people. Countries realized that yes, there is something where every country is facing a problem. So they began to take actions to protect environment within their boundaries. And later they started creating awareness. awareness, and they started reaching different countries. They started reaching different countries, different countries. And this aspect, awareness and reaching to the different countries, ultimately it made a global propaganda, it made a global approach. And that is where these all fruits, these all fruits led it led it led to something called as the United Nations Conference on Human Environment. It is also referred as Stockholm Conference. It is also called as Stockholm Conference. Stockholm Conference, which was in the year 1972. In the year 1972. And this Stockholm Conference was held between June 5 to June 16 in the year 1972. Now, this Stockholm Conference is the first international consensus. Sorry, it is the first international conference on environment. So this is the first international conference on environment. UNCHE, that is United Nations Conference on Human Environment, or it is also called as Stockholm Conference. Stockholm Conference. Now the major outcome of this first international cooperation is that it kept the climate change into international platform. It provided the climate change issue to international platform. So now countries of all the world, they started discussing, negotiating the problems of climate change. So it created a platform to discuss the climate change issues globally, internationally. Second is it linked the development issue with environmental. So it says that there is nothing called as the variation or isolation of environment from economic development. So it linked the close relationship between economic development and environment environment. So there is a close relationship between economic development and environment, right? So what does this mean? It means that if we make large amount of economic development like constructing of the industries and all, so the environment will be more destroyed. If we release more amount of fossil fuels, if we cut more forests, then the environment will be destroyed. And if we keep on protecting the environment, then economic development will not be there. Understand this. Economic development, if we do without planning, like cutting off the forest, using of the fossil fuels, then it will make the environmental degradation. So economic development without environment concern will make the conditions very worst. And if you take only environmental concern without taking economic development, then where the economic enlightenment will be there, where we will get all type of the progress. So hence it made a strong point that economic development and the environment are the two faces of the same coin. Both are very, very important. So when you are doing economic development, keep environment into concern. So it provided a very strong approach that economic development and environment are both linked with each other, and they are the two faces of the same coin. You can't neglect environment only on keeping economic development, and you can't neglect economic development by keeping only environment. So there should be a balance between economic development and environment. They should create a balance between the economic development and environment. So that balance has to be needed in the with present scenarios. So this is what the first international conference or Stockholm Conference was done. And this Stockholm Conference was responsible for creating an important institution called as United Nations Environment Program. So this was responsible for creating the United Nations Environment Program. United Nations Environment Program. Environment Program. And this United Nations Environment Program, where is in Nairobi. Its headquarter is in Nairobi. Its headquarter is in Nairobi. That is Kenya. In the year 1972. In the year 1972. Right. Now, balance between economy and environment. Yes, balance between economy and environment. You have to take both into consideration. There should be a balance between economic development and environment. Yes, between economic development and environment. So that's what I told. So there should be a balance between both economic development as well as the environment. Both should be taken into criteria. Right. Now here, the United Nations Environment Program was to guide and coordinate the environmental activities within the United Nations. Now, it focuses on many areas: climate change, ecosystem management, disaster conflicts, environmental governance, resources. All these areas were there. Now, this United Nations Environment Programs, they provided many reports, and these reports are very vital to understand the climate change perspectives, disaster conflicts, etc. And this United Nations Environment Program also manages many funds. It also manages many funds, which plays an important role in applying the conventions. And this United Nations Environment Program also create awareness among the people. Awareness among the people. So all these activities are being done by UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, which makes awareness, encourages leadership, make community participation, involve the people in finding the solution for the climate change issues which were highlighted from 1970s. 1970s. Right. So all these are the definitions or the objectives of the United Nations Environment Program. Now here you should remember the first day where it was met, June 5, is very prominent day. So every year this day, June 5, is celebrated to commemorate the event as the World Environment Day. World Environment Day. So every year June 5 is celebrated as the World Environment Day to commemorate the Stockholm Conference. But the first Environment Day was held not in the year 1972. It was held in the year 1973. The first World Environment Day was held in 1973 in Stockholm. In Stockholm. And the theme of the first Environment Day is only one Earth. Only one Earth. That means we have only one Earth. If we don't protect them, then the end is very feasible. So only one Earth is the theme of the first World Environment Day, which was celebrated in the year 1973. And 2023, we celebrated 50 years. 50 years of World Environment Day was celebrated in the year 2023. Now, in the year 1987, a significant change was there. If you keep on celebrating the World Environment Day in one country, it will not create awareness. To spread the awareness to other countries, to spread the awareness to other countries, it was decided that the venues should be rotated. The venue where they celebrate World Environment Day should be rotated. So it moves from one country to another country, one continent to another continent, where it can reach to the other parts. The awareness can be reached. And This is where you have to remember that it created a huge impact and effective management of the policies when it reached from one country to another country. And ultimately, you have to remember the 2023 World Environment Day. Now, where this 2023 World Environment Day was held. So it was held in the country in African part, which is called as Cote d'Ivoire. It was held in Cote d'Ivoire in partnership with Netherlands. Cote d'Ivoire. Yes, Ivory Coast. Perfect. Ivory Coast in partnership with Netherlands. And the theme of that, can anybody tell? The theme of the 2023, theme of 2023. It is solution to plastic waste. Solution to plastic waste. Solution to the plastic waste. So that is the theme of 2023. Now, where will be the 2024 World Environment Day will be celebrated? 2024. This year, where we are celebrating that? Which country will host 2024 World Environment Day? Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia. Perfect. Saudi Arabia. Now, this World Environment Day is very important because last year we completed 50 years. Last year we completed 50 years. So any such events which are completed 50 years are very important. Take an example of Project Tiger. Project Tiger has also completed 50 years from 1973 to 2023. So Project Tiger has also completed 50 years of its existence, right? So this is something which you have to remember. World Environment Day and these present part. Right now, everybody at this stage, they know that there is something which is associated with the world with reference to environmental concern. Everybody was associated with that. So we had a reports, we had an idea. Everybody knew that there is something which is making a huge impact on economic development, but we needed more data, we needed more information, and that is where the brand commission was set up. Brand commission was set up in 1980. And this is an independent commission on international development issues, and which was held by Willy Brandt. Willy Brandt. And this was to study how the developed and developing worlds, how the developed and developing worlds can perform in their activities. The major idea of this is to understand the economic aspects of the world, of the world economic aspects of the world. And this brand commission, when it submitted its report, we refer that as brand report. When it submitted its report, that is brand report. In that, it created an imaginary line. And this imaginary line, which is created, which has been developed by the brand commission, we refer that as brand line. We refer that as brand line. And this brand line highlighted economic disparities of the globe. It highlighted economic disparities. It highlighted economic disparities of the globe. So generally we refer that as north and south. We refer that as north and south. So north means developed countries. North means developed countries. And south of the brand line, developing or poor countries. Or poor countries. And this line is referred as brand line. We refer that as brand line. So it made a strong reference that The present issues are there, and the world is divided into developed and developing. The world is divided into developed and developing, and issues are there. But these issues can be settled only when the developed and developing countries both combinedly work together. All the issues can be settled only when both the developed and developing countries work together to settle the issue, right? So both developed as well as, that's what global south and global north, it is an imaginary line, global south and global north. South is less developed or poor one, north is more developed according to the brand line. Now this line does not have such significance in 2024, it does not have much significance, but still in 1980s it was a very prominent part. It outlined that how the developed and developing countries must work together to face the problem, to face the problem. Now we had a brand report, we had something called as the economic disparities which were there. Now accumulation of information was huge from 1970 to 1980s. Real evidences were seen. So that's why United Nations General Assembly, UNGA, it decided that we will make one more strong commission to read, understand, and assess the present issue. And hence, in the year 1983, in the year 1983, the United Nations General Assembly, it set up a significant commission, which is very, very significant in the context of all the global parameters, called as Brundtland Commission. And it is also called as World Commission on Environment and Development. Brundtland Commission or World Commission on Environment Development. Brundtland, the person who headed that. The person who headed that is Brundtland. So named after that, it is called as Brundtland Commission, and it is also called as World Commission on Environment Development. And this was set up by United Nations General Assembly. The idea was to study and assess the brand report, to study and assess the brand report, plus discuss the different international and national strategies, discuss the international and national strategies which were to protect the environment and promoting development. We need a strategies because development are not uniformly, developed countries are having different issues, developing countries are having different issues, the strategies of developed countries are different, strategies of developing countries are different. So hence it wanted that international and national strategies for protecting environment and promoting development, which were the major objectives of the Brundtland Commission. And this commission submitted its reports in the year, it submitted its report in the year 1987. And we refer that as the Brundtland report. We refer that as Brundtland report. Report. And this Brundtland report was submitted with the title called as Our Common Future. Our Common Future. Our Common Future. And in this Brundtland report of 1987, for the first time, it used the term called as sustainable development. For the first time, it used the term called as sustainable development. First time it used the term called as sustainable development. So the first time in 1987 in the Brundtland report, and the report is referred as the Our Common Future. So Brundtland report is also referred as World Commission on Environment Development or Brundtland Commission. It created a word, it coined the word called as sustainable development with the title Our Common Future. And here it called for the strategies for integrating environment and development. Development means economic development. So what was told in the Stockholm conference was affirmed in this. What was told in the Stockholm conference was affirmed, withheld, strongly held by the Brundtland report, that environment and economic development are not two different entities. Both are the two faces of the same coin. We should work in both parameters. Economic development is also important. Environmental concern is also very, very important. So this is called as sustainable development. Now, what is the sustainable development? So this is the last discussion. After that, we'll wind up. Sustainable development. Now, see this. This is an agricultural field. Agricultural field. Now, in this agricultural field, if we are using chemical fertilizers, or we are using chemical pesticides, this will yield, this will increase the yield. Productivity will be there. So we refer this as development. It is called as development. It will provide more financial benefit to the farmers who are doing. But after 50 years, or after 100 years, the same agriculture field will not provide what benefits which can do. It will degrade. It will degrade, or the soil will lose its fertility. It will not provide the benefits which the agricultural area has to do after 50 years or 100 years. After that, we cannot reap the benefit. We can't enjoy the benefits of this agriculture soil. It will become a degraded land, or it will become a land which is not using, or which is not significant for any type of benefits. But instead of that, if we do organic farming in that area, if we do natural farming in that area, so in both the cases, even after 100 years, the soil will not lose its fertility. It will provide the benefits. It will provide the benefits even after 100 years. So such types of developments where you are reaping the benefit, and the next generation will also reap the benefit without degradation, such types of developments we refer that as sustainable development. So it means meet the need of present generation without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. It means that you reap the benefit, you reap the benefit, and the benefit should be given to the next generation also. The benefit should be given to the next generation also, without degradation. And we refer that as sustainable development. That means you reap the benefit so that the next generation also will get the benefit without any degradation. So organic farming, natural farming is sustainable development. It is sustainable development. Whereas this agriculture where we use chemical fertilizer is not sustainable. It is only development but without sustainability. So hence the sustainable development consists of three components. That is, two are there: economic development and environmental concern. These to be kept in the mind: environmental protection, economic growth. And it also talks about social equity. Social equity means, when we talk about social equity, it should be taken as which addresses disparity or barriers addresses disparities or barriers. It means that we have poor people, women's in the earth. We are having poor, we have women's, we have weaker sections, etc. Right? So if you treat them equally, then they can't enhance their productivity. If you treat them equally, they can't enhance their productivity. So hence we have to address their disparities. Poor should be given more prominence, weaker section should be given more prominence, so that they can make a huge impact in the societies. So hence it is not equality, it is equity. It's not equality. So hence it addresses the disparities or barriers, giving prominence and taking all the peoples there, poor people, weaker section, all into that frame. So they will reap the benefit of all the resources. They will reap the benefit of all the resources. We refer that as social equity. So hence social equity talks about reducing poverty, increasing literacy, increasing health conditions, etc. So all these are referred as social equity, a concept which is used in your social issues. So hence, when we talk about any aspect of sustainable development, if you are writing UPSC mains, you should remember that sustainable development has three components, whether it is fulfilling the three components or not. The first component is economic development. If any such sustainable development, is it providing economic benefit? Just check that. Then second, along with economic development, is it doing some environmental concern? Check that. Then third one is, by doing these two, is it providing something to the society? Is it reducing poverty? Is it creating some impact on the society to bring them into upper hand? We refer that as social equity. If all the three are fulfilled by any event, then we say that as the sustainable development. If any one is missing, we don't call it as sustainable development. So henceforth, whenever you are writing sustainable development in agriculture, is it providing economic benefit? Is it maintaining society? Is it providing the environmental concern? If all the three are there, then that agriculture is referred as sustainable. If any of them is affected, we don't call it as sustainability. So sustainability will always talk about three components. And if you work out on these three components, then easily you can write very good answers which can be asked in UPSC. Most of the times they ask question on sustainable development. Is it clear? So by this we can conclude the today's class, and we'll meet up tomorrow again at 10 a.m. and we'll discuss the what we have ended up here. Whatever we have ended up here, from here we will discuss the tomorrow's class. More important COPs and all. Then we will take up pollution and forest parts. So again, we'll meet up tomorrow. Till then, take care and bye bye.
ಹೋಗ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ ಸರ್ ನಾ
ಯಾಕೆ
ಹೋಗಿ ತಳಗ ಹೋಗಿ ಬಂದಿರಿ ಸರ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ವಾಪಸ್
ಕನ್ಫರ್ಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲ
ಕನ್ಫರ್ಮ್